Welcome back to Inside Sources. Today we are leading with a conversation about some of the drama that is going on in the National Assembly, specifically the Senate. This past week, the Senate actually suspended one of its members, that is Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan. And we remember that she had made an allegation about sexual harassment just before the suspension. And so we want to discuss what exactly is going on, what are the implications of the activities, of the things that we've seen this week, and then what are the legal dimensions to it. To join me in that important conversation, I have two important guests. All the way from New York, I have Professor Mujuba Olufunke Okome, who is a professor of political science and African and Women's Studies from the Brooklyn College of the City University of New York. Prof, you are welcome to Inside Sources.
Thank you.
All right. And here in the studio, I have a returning guest, Mr. Ibrahim Usman Wali, who is a legal practitioner in Abuja. Mr. Wali, welcome back to Inside Sources.
Thank you. Thank you, Laul.
All right. So let's start with Professor Olufunke Okome. Now, if you are to describe what it is that has happened in the Senate in these past few days, where you have the suspension of Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan after she had made an allegation of sexual harassment. How will you describe what is going on, and what do you think? What's your take, Prof?
Well, I think it's patriarchy on steroids because, you know, the allegation of sexual harassment is a very serious one, and it should have been properly investigated by the Senate. Why is it patriarchy on steroids? The Senate has only, I think, 4 women out of hundreds, 160 or so, of Nigerians representing us. And the allegation, you know, when I say it's patriarchy is a system where there's male dominance validated as the normative frame from which society operates. So women are supposed to be silent. Women are supposed to accommodate and be, accepting of overtures from men, even when those overtures are inappropriate. A woman who speaks up is then chastised, infantilized, and unsupported, even by fellow women. So this is showing that as Nigeria, we are not progressive, that we are not in sync with the times, that, you know, Rwanda, that small country, has 60-something% women in its national legislature. What is wrong with us? So we are carrying last. We're proud of carrying last. We're a giant that has no feet, and we are not embarrassed. This is what is going on, so that I don't take up too much time.
Okay, I'm still going to stay with you because I wanted to follow up on that. So what do you consider to be the most significant thing that happened in what we have seen? Now, we have seen that before now, Senator Natasha Akpoti, it was said, they reassigned her sitting as position. And then she was accused of not complying. And so they also said that when she brought a petition, that she did not do it properly. So they are saying that, look, she's flouting the rules of the Senate. She's not doing things properly. You know, and I think there is a place for that. But on the other hand, she is also making an allegation, which in my view also is a very serious allegation. Now, how do you think this should have been handled in a way that people will feel that there is a sense of fairness and justice? Because in my view, we haven't seen that. Prof?
Yeah, the sitting issue is a very serious one too, because it is important that in a free and fair democracy, people should be allowed to object to situations that don't favor them. And Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, she stated her concerns, and that should have been taken seriously. Instead, in the classical way that Nigerian men tend to respond, and I'm saying Nigerian men because I'm kind of generalizing. I know they are good and feminist men and men who support women. But in the main, Nigerian men tend to see women as less than men, as not as capable as men, as people who should be silent, and as people who should take any kind of abuse, discrimination, put downs without responding. Some women also believe that this is how to go because we are all in a patriarchal system. And this patriarchy influences people to behave in the way they do. It gives incentives to women who support the patriarchy so that they are the ones who advance faster in that system. And that's why many of the women who support this kind of bad behavior do so. It gives kudos to men when they behave badly. If a woman behaves that way, she will be chastised. She will be, even sometimes ostracized and cast out of a position that legitimately belongs to her. So that was terrible. And it is also more terrible that there are there are allegations of sexual harassment, and the Senate president should have recused himself. He did not. Proper investigations should have been carried out. What they did in the Senate was a sham investigation. And as I said, Nigeria should be embarrassed. And I think the Senate as an institution needs to rescue itself and show that it understands what democracy is about. And democracy requires that males and females in that body must be treated in an equal way, that there should be respect for all members, that nobody should be talked about as though they are some, second-class citizen in that institution. And a lot of the aspersions that are cast against women, for me, as somebody who is Nigerian, who lives in the United States, and I teach international politics. I teach African gender politics. It is embarrassing, and it is, the men in the Senate act as though we are in the 19th century. And a lot of the statements that men make in that body, I think they need to reflect, get a bit more education, get up to date with what the international norms are. Go back and read the Constitution, and then come back and act as mature, responsible, thoughtful representatives of all Nigerians. Because what they are doing so far does not reflect that.
Excellent. Thank you, Prof. We are coming back to you now. Let's bring it to the studio here where we have Mr. Wali. And, I'd like to have your take, but I also wanted to ask that under the 1999 Constitution, does the Senate as an institution, do they really have the powers to suspend an elected senator from doing his or her work?
Thank you for this question. I see that you try to limit it to the 1999 Constitution, which is fine, but I have to say at the onset that by the totality of our laws, and not just the Constitution, including judicial pronouncements, and obviously specifically the Constitution, the Senate or the House of Representatives or the respective houses in the states, do not have the power whatsoever to suspend an elected senator or an elected member generally. They don't have the power whatsoever. So let me begin by quoting Section 4, subsection 8, because it forms the foundation upon which every other argument is going to be built. Section 4, subsection 8, Section 4 generally provides for the legislative powers and, saying that legislators have the powers to make law and then, to oversee the other parts of government as well, yes. But subsection 8 says that in the exercise of that power, they are subject to the court. That is, they are subject to the court's supervision as well. Right. And they cannot make any law that ousts or seeks to oust the jurisdiction of the court. That is very, very important, right? Now let's go to Section 60, which provides for these Senate standing orders. The Senate standing orders is constitutionally rooted. But it begins by saying that subject to the Constitution, or rather subject to the provisions of the Constitution, you may make standing orders for your internal affairs. Right? So these two provisions are very important as anchors to what comes next. Now, if we go to Section 67, it provides for how a senator can vacate his seat legally, or how a House of Representatives can vacate his seat legally. Absence for more than 1/3 of the entire tenure. Maybe if you switch political parties, if you are no more a Nigerian, if you're part of a group that is not recognized by law, right? So all of these things are provided in the Constitution that, you would need to vacate the seat. Section 69 now goes on to provide recall proceedings that, people who actually elected you have the possibility, have the power rather, to recall you back. Now, in legal parlance generally, right, where a law provides for a group of things in a particular class or in a particular genus, and it provides for them specifically, then every other thing that is excluded is deemed absolutely excluded. So if it provides for vacancy, cessation of tenure in the office, it provides for recall, and it is silent on suspension, it means that there is no suspension, and the House cannot suspend you, without a doubt. But let me take you to judicial decisions. There was a particular case. Important. Yes, and I will reference this case because of there's some sort of similarity with the current case. Honorable Dana Rifkatu versus Speaker of Bauchi said in 2017, the Court of Appeal gave the decision. She was the only female in the House, by the way. It's very important.
In Bauchi State.
In Bauchi State at the time. She challenged the moving of the capital of the Tafawa Balewa local government to Bogoro. She's from Bogoro to Bonono. She challenged it, and they suspended her. So she went to court. She got judgment at the Federal Court, and she went to the Court of Appeal, and the Court of Appeal upstamped the judgment of the Federal High Court. But one thing that is very important here is the judges, in their wisdom, they said that only those who employ a person can suspend the person. And then they went on to say that you cannot withdraw her salary and allowances because by the Constitution, it is the Revenue Mobilization Allocation and Financial Commission who decide the pay of legislators.
So you don't have a control over it.
You don't have a control over the pay. So that is Section 111.
So not only don't you have powers about suspension, you also do have powers over our remuneration.
God bless you. If you look at Section 70 of the Constitution, it provides for the remuneration of National Assembly members. And it is not within their own ambit. It is the RMFAC.
That does
right? So if you look at the totality of these provisions, you see that they don't have the power. But then if you also escalate it to general democratic provisions, if you look at Section 77, for example, it is the same section that gives every citizen who is above 18 the suffrage, the right to vote. It says that every constituency in Nigeria must be represented at every given time.
Yes.
You must be represented.
Right.
So if you look at the totality of these provisions, you will see that by the Constitution or by our law, looking at it in a Puritan perspective, because the standing order provides for suspension provisions, right? But that is why Section 60 is very important, because it says that your standing order is subject to the Constitution. So if you look at it like that, you'd see that there is no provision for suspension whatsoever. But there are other decisions like that of Honorable Dino Melai at the time with the Progressives against the House of Representatives, although the issue there was whether the suspension for more than, the indefinite suspension at the time was valid, and JTO, I think the current chief judge of the Federal High Court today, he said it clearly that you cannot go against your own standing order. Your own standing order says that you can only suspend for 14 days, and that is the current, provision in even the current standing order that was amended in 2023, that you can only suspend for 14 days, maximally, by the way. It actually begins that, okay, if it is a minor offense, a minor misconduct, you should suspend for the rest of the proceeding of the day. However, if it is major, then you can now, suspend for maximally 14 days. Now, I think she was suspended for raising for the seat issue, raising Order 10. And it is very, surprising, because if you actually read the Order 10, it says that where a senator actually raises any issue hinging on the privilege
of the senator,
of the senator, every other matter should take. It is there. She read it, but nobody, every other matter should take
second place.
Yes, second place until it is resolved. It is there. So if they are relying on the same order on one hand, then I think it only makes sense for them to rely on the entire order to read it in community. But I don't think that is the case, because if you look at what the head of the Senate Committee on Ethics, Privileges and Public Petitions said about the nullity of her petition because of the signature, which I don't agree with, by the way. If you look at the provisions that follow that, particularly sub 7, it says that where the matter is in court already, you hands off. And he read a letter from MJ Numa SN where, a court order was attached that, this matter was, not that this matter is in court, in fact, that there's a court order, a direct court order that says that you should, wait until, and it says you should come back by 10th of March, by the way. It's not as if, it's indefinite. But then they still went on and flagrantly disobeyed the court order.
By suspending her.
By suspending her. By even continuing with the seat in itself. The thing with court orders is, even if you don't agree with it, even if you think it's illegal, unless you set it aside, you are bound to obey it constitutionally. So if you look at the totality of our laws, frankly, there's been a breach. There's been a breach, and
so the Senate of the Federal Republic have breached their own rules.
They breached their own rules.
And they've breached the Constitution.
They breached the Constitution.
And they have also ignored judicial rulings.
Yes, which is, if you ask in my opinion, which is actually the wider. We should be the wider
of course,
focus
if you look at the whole
because
thing.
it just by that stroke of genius, they've undermined the Senate itself, that is the legislative arm of government, and they've undermined the judiciary. Okay,
all right. Let's come to you, Prof. What the lawyer has said now, establishes the fact that the Senate have been acting in flagrant violation of their own standing rules or standing order, in violation of the Constitution, and in violation of judicial pronouncements on the matter. The question I want to ask you now, Professor Okome, is what kind of signaling is the Nigerian Senate sending to the entire world? What kind of signaling are they sending to Nigerians, to women, especially women who are suffering from sexual harassment?
The signaling is that it is okay to sexually harass, that this is our norm, that this is something that is legitimate to do, and that a survivor of sexual harassment does not have any legitimate ground to complain. They should be quiet. If they are not quiet, they should be silenced. So this shows that the patriarchy in Nigeria is misogynist, that is woman-hating, that it discriminates against women. It also forbids women to have a voice in terms of being able to articulate matters that concern them, complain about injustices that are visited upon them. And I did say, too, that this is Women's History Month. actually, from this week, from Sunday, you will have meetings in New York of the Commission on the Status of Women, which is a body that looks at how far countries have gone towards recognizing the rights of women, and also meeting the Beijing platform of action, 30% representation for women. Obviously, with the 4 women in the Senate, Nigeria has failed this test. Obviously, also, with the kind of unjust and unlawful actions that are being taken so blatantly by the Senate, Nigeria seems not to care about its reputation in the Committee of Nations. It seems as if we have people in the Senate, and also, I dare say, in the National Assembly, because I've seen similar ways in which women are denigrated, women are, otherized, women are treated with disdain in that body. So Nigeria is out of step with other nations. Let's also be clear, SDG 5, the Sustainable Development Goal 5, is about gender equality. And Nigeria is a signatory to the Sustainable Development Goals document. It's also a signatory to the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. Nigeria is a signatory to the major international conventions, agreements, and, promises that are made that there would be gender equality. But our Senate somehow doesn't see the need to be in compliance. And I am shocked by the 80% sexual harassment figure. But I dare say too, anecdotally, if you speak to women, you would find that majority of women have been sexually harassed. A lot of them don't speak up because we do not have laws that they are able to draw on. And then we don't have social support for people who make these charges that enable for them to be taken seriously, for investigations to be done and redress made by the aggressors. So I believe that it is still possible to redeem ourselves as a nation, and that our institutions, as I said before, these representatives, these senators, they need to go and study and then observe the world and where the world is moving and realize that they're out of step. If these men do not stop doing this, I urge Nigerian women of good conscience to come out and protest against them, and also insist on fair representation in that body. Because actually what I would like in the Senate and in the National Assembly, the state assemblies, the local government bodies is I want parity. I want 50-50. And I want the kind of women that would stand up to this patriarchy on steroids that we see being manifested in the Senate.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Mr. Wali, your last word, just quickly, in a minute.
All right, I have to correct myself. I said that it was the Chief Judge who conducted the Dino proceeding. It was actually Justice Bello. He did the Abdulmumin Jibrin one.
The Federal High Court.
The Federal High Court. He did the Abdulmumin Jibrin one. Okay. But he actually said it that, the National Assembly, or rather the legislature generally, should understand that they cannot operate with absolute immunity, that they should actually embody, the democratic and constitutional principles, and they should espouse them, and they should put it forth. So he actually admonished them, a very brilliant admonishment at the time. But I have to say that there's a document that I saw online that it has featured very thinly, Code of Ethics of the Nigerian Senate, or rather of the National Assembly. If you read the document, you probably end up in tears, because you'd see that what is provided there and what we have seen so far, are two worlds apart. Really, if you look at the procedure there...
That is a document of the National Assembly itself.
Yes, it is the document of the National Assembly itself. right? But if you look at the procedure there, you'd find out every legislator who feels like, the code has been broken can put forth a petition. That is why I do not disagree. I do not agree with that, signature preliminary objection.
That Natasha cannot sign.
Yes, and by the way, if you look at the entire regime of the public petitions section of their rules, you find that it specifically mentions public petitions. The committee's ethics, privileges, and public petitions. It specifically mentioned public petitions coming from the public, which a senator should promote. But it is very different from a petition that is based on ethical grounds between one senator and another, or between one representative and another. And finally, for the sake of rule of law and fair hearing, the Senate President ought to have recused himself. Now, a lot of arguments are that, the suspension was, because of the seating arrangement and not the sexual harassment that prevents her from carrying out her legislative duty. It is very important to complete. If you read a petition, it is very important to complete it. Don't just stay on sexual harassment, because it's just very easy to defend. Sexual harassment, preventing her from conducting the affairs of
doing her job, she was elected.
Her job. But by the principles of fair hearing, which is rooted in the principles of natural justice, justice must not only be done, it must be seen to be done by an ordinary man, by the ordinary reasonable. So it doesn't matter whether. What do you think?
Exactly, and that's
what do you think, Prof?
Exactly.
That is it.
That is what justice is.
Is there bias? Was it impartial? So he ought to have recused himself if indeed he was, bound into rule of law and justice. But that's not the case.
Thank you so much, Professor Olufunke Okome and Mr. Ibrahim Wali. Thank you for coming to Inside Sources. Thank you for your contribution. I would have wished that, this is not what we are talking about in the Nigerian Senate. I would have wished that the fight in the Nigerian Senate would be something that has to do with the welfare of the Nigerian people, something that will have to do with public interest. But here we are, discussing about it. Nonetheless, very important points, and we hope that those who have ears, they are listening. And like Prof said, we can still redeem the situation.